So what we're going to do now is deal with the fact that we get a token back from the server, but at the moment we're not really doing anything with it. So let's change that. And let's head back to VS Code, and this is getting pretty busy up here. So I'm just going to close all of these down and clean things up. And what we're going to do is we're going to create another new store, and this is going to be called Common Store. And it's going to contain features that are not specifically to do with our users or our activities or anything like that. And inside our stores, I'm just going to create a new file and call it commonstore.ts. And I'll say export default class and just call this common store. And we'll also need access to our root store. So I'll say root store and root store. VS Code is very picky about what it decides to automatically import. I'm going to have to manually import this, but I'll add the constructor first and say root store and again root store, which we pass in from the root store when we initialize a new instance of our common store. And then we'll say list.rootStore equals root store. And I'll just go ahead and import root store, which is a named import, from, and specify the root store. And inside the root store itself, we'll need to add our common store and say common store. And this one's coming in, that's good. And then I can say list.commonStore equals new common store and specify lists. So now all that's set up inside our common store, let's take a look at what we're going to do here. And in here we'll add an observable and bring this in from MobX and full a token, and this is going to be a type of string, or it's going to be null, and we'll set it to null initially. We'll also add an observable for the app itself and say app loaded, and we'll set this to false initially. And then what we'll do is we'll create an action and make sure this is brought in from MobX, and we'll say set token, and we'll pass in the token, which is going to be a string. And what we'll do is we'll save this token in the browser's local storage so that we can easily get access to it. So we'll say window.localstorage.setItem, and we'll call it JWT as its key, and then its value will be the token. And then I'll set the token itself equal to token. And we'll just add another action for the app loaded, so we'll say action, and we'll say set app loaded equals, and we'll say this app loaded equals true. And we'll be using these inside our app.tsx so that when the application itself initializes, we can do something with this. But first of all, let's go back to our user store, because now we've got a method to set the token. Let's go to our login method, and after we get our user back from our API, I'll remove this console.log, and what we can do is say list.rootstore.commonstore.setToken, and we can pass in the user.token. And this is why it's useful to create the root store in that way, because it gives us a kind of pathway to get back to go up and down to our common store to get access to this setToken method. And what we can also do at this stage is add a action to log out and say logout equals, and all we want to do in here is set the token to null in our common store. So we'll say list.rootstore.commonstore.setToken, and we'll set it to null. And we're getting a type error here because our setToken method is only taking a string as a parameter. So let's just go to our common store and specify this can be a union of string or null. and then it's complaining because our token is possibly null. So this is, just for the time being, we'll add the exclamation mark to bypass the TypeScript warning there. And back in our user store, what we'll also do is set this.user equal to null. And then let's head back to our navbar, and we'll set the onClick event of our drop-down item for logout. We'll just set that back to logout again, but we'll also need to bring in the logout method to our destructured props, and we'll set the onClick here equal to logout. So if we go and log in again and click login, and I'll just open up the console as well. And we've got some warnings that we'll need to deal with very shortly, but for now let's just test the bob@test.com and password once again, and click login. We get taken to our activities, and the 401 is coming back from our activities that we're trying to fetch at this particular case, at this particular moment, and we'll deal with that shortly. But if we take a look at our application, what we can see is that we've now got the JWT stored inside our local storage with the value of whatever we're getting back from our server here. And if I click on logout, then that's not quite what we're looking for, but it's been set to null. And we'll look at a better way of dealing with this. But we should also redirect ourselves back to the home page when we log out. So let's go back to our user store, and after we set the user to null, let's set the history.push, and we'll just pass them back to the home page in this case. So now we can set our token inside our local storage. Let's take a look next at what we need to do in Axios to pass up the token for our requests. And we'll take a look at that next.